bet once a week we get a call or an email from somebody saying, I think in-ear monitors are the solution to my problem, but I don't know where to start. Can you help me? The answer is yes. So before we get started, I do have some terminology here. You can see in-ears, IEMs, in-ear monitors, ears, those are all synonyms. Buds are the thing that actually goes in your ear, and they'll generally connect to a 1/8 inch jack. And then there is a pack, which is a wireless receiver, or it could even be a wired amplifier. That's the thing that you're going to plug your buds into, and then you can turn it up or down. So those are just a couple of terms that I might use later on, and I want you to understand what those mean. Now, why would I want in-ear monitors? It's going to make it easier to hear yourself. That's always a good thing. It's going to lower stage volume because we're getting rid of an amplifier or a wedge. We're going to reduce the amount of feedback because feedback is a function of how loud things are on the stage. And if we can lower stage volume, feedback starts to go down, either with an acoustic instrument with a pickup, or if a microphone, or if you're singing or whatever. It's going to give you more mobility on stage because you don't have to stand next to your amp anymore. You can move around and your buds are still going to be in your ear and you can still hear yourself. And hearing protection is a huge part of this. Rock and roll stages get really loud, and we can start having some hearing damage if we're not taking care of our hearing. So here is a general signal path for what an in-ear system would look like. We got this guy beneath me with a violin and a mohawk because, yeah. And so he's going to plug in, or she is going to plug into their effects, whatever that effects is. They're going to send that process signal out to a mixer, where it's going to get blended with all the other musicians on stage. Each person with an in-ear monitor is going to get their own aux, or their own send, or their own mix. So each person is going to hear something different, and that can be mixed on the board. So that signal is going to go generally to a wireless transmitter, which is going to go through the air to a wireless receiver that you're wearing on your body somewhere. And then that powers the buds or the headphones that are on your skull. Okay? So why do I need a mixer? Why can't I just plug this thing into the output of my multi-effects board and just run, the headphones up to my head from that? Because with the buds in, you can't hear anything else that's happening in the room. And if you can't hear the other players in your ensemble, you can't play with them. I mean, I can look at the piano player, but I can't necessarily tell what he or she's doing unless I can hear it. And with the buds in, I'm not going to be able to hear it unless it's piped in. So we're all going to send our signals to a mixing board, and then each one of us is going to get our own mix. You really cannot share in-ear mixes. That's a disaster. So each person is going to get their own mix, and I can say, okay, I need more keyboard in my ears. I need less violin. What am I saying? I'm never going to say I need less violin in my ears. Less drums in my ears. Definitely don't want to hear that screechy singer in my ears. So you can control what's coming into your ears. If you cannot hear what other people are doing, it's really hard to play with them. That's why it has to go through a mixer. Well, what if I just wear one? I can pipe my violin into one ear, and then I can listen to what's happening in the room with the other ear. It sounds like a creative solution. It's a bad idea, and it's actually kind of dangerous. Binaural summation, you can look that up if you want to know more. But basically, it means that your body is designed to hear more or less the same thing with each ear. If you're not hearing essentially the same thing in both ears, you're going to have each thing louder in order to quote, hear it. Which is going to lead to hearing damage. So if you've just got your violin in one ear and then you're listening to the world with the other, that violin is going to have to be a lot louder than it should be for you to be able to hear it. And you're going to be damaging your hearing in that ear without even knowing it. All right, so transmitter. Okay, which transmitter should I use? I'm not going to give a bunch of brand names here. We don't carry many of these things. We have one that I can put up a link to here. That's kind of an entry-level wireless in-ear system. It's not going to be a big touring rig, but it's going to be a way for people to sort of dip their toe into this water a little if they want to. I will say that as cost goes up, so does quality. And not just the fidelity of the sound that's coming through, but also your radio transmitter and receiver quality. So yeah, as cost goes up, quality goes up. And believe me when I say I've worked with these, several $1,000 in-ear systems, and I've worked with the couple $100 in-ear systems. it's a dramatic difference from one to the other. Now, does it have to be wireless? Can I go wired? 100%. You can totally use a wired system. There's some really nice wired in-ear receivers. There are some fairly inexpensive ways to do this, basically with just a headphone amp. Just have to be aware that you are tethered. And, I go pretty far out of my way to not be tethered. I have a wireless system on my instrument. I use wireless in-ears. Just be aware that you're tethered if you've got a wireless or a wired in-ear system. Okay, which buds should I use? Just like transmitters and receivers, quality leads to price. So what am I paying for if I'm paying more than $50? Because I can go to Walgreens and get these buds that I plug into my iPhone and I can listen to music. Okay, yeah, you can do that for $5 or $10. Or you can pay $2,000 for some custom molded in-ears. What am I getting? What does that $2,000 buy me? Comfort. You're going to have these things in for 3 or 4 hours a night sometimes. You'd be surprised how uncomfortable the poorly fitting ones can be after a couple hours. The fit. The better they fit in your ear, the better they reject sound from the world, and the lower the level that you have to pipe in to be able to hear yourself. That's a good thing. You're also going to have an increased sound quality. The fidelity of the sound in a $2,000 set of in-ears is worlds different than the fidelity of sound in a little $10 buds that you get at Walmart. And on stage, you would be surprised how much that matters. All right, so I'm going to walk you through basically kind of 4 rigs here. We got the ultra cheap. You just get a headphone amp. You run a signal from the board to this headphone amp. You get the El Cheapo buds, stick in your ear. You're looking at maybe $50 to get a setup. Pretty easy to do. If you're kind of dipping your toe into this water and you're like, I really don't do this. I'm not getting paid to do this, or I'm not getting paid much to do this. I just kind of want to try it. It's not a bad idea to try something like this for $50 or so and say, yeah, I think this is something I want to pursue a little further. There's fairly cheap. You can get a budget wireless system like one of the ones that we've got. And then some of these sort of universal fit buds, maybe you can go up a little bit from the dollar store buds. For about $300 or so, you could have a fairly cheap wireless system. Then there's sort of like this intermediate rig, which would be a decent wireless system. So maybe some quality universal buds. They're Shure or Bose or whatever makes some quality sort of universal fit buds. You're going to be looking $1,200 to $1,500 for what I'd call an intermediate rig. And then a pro level touring rig, you're looking $3,000 plus. They're generally around $2,000 for the wireless system. And you're probably $1,000 or more for the custom molded in-ears that you're going to put in. So for, the thing that if Zach Brown is out there, or Garth Brooks or Beyonce, they're all using, these will be $3,000 plus per person that's on stage. So that's what the big dogs are using. And there's a reason they're using them. They're really nice. Now, how do I use these? You want to be really careful with the buds in, with your ears in your ears. You don't have any frame of reference for how loud things are. The way your brain calculates loudness, when you put something inside your ears, it messes up that algorithm for your brain, and you really can't process how loud you've got these things turned up. You may, at the end of the night, man, it sounded so good in my ears, and you go to take them out and you're like, oh, they were way louder than the room I'm in. And so we've lost all that hearing protection because we're actually listening to something louder than we would have been listening to. And you can very easily damage your hearing because, man, when I turn these things up, it sounds a little better. And I turn it up and it sounds a little better. And I turn it up more, it sounds even better. You got to be really careful. So how do we avoid that? Once the band is hitting, I'll actually turn my pack off and listen to what's bleeding through. I have custom molded in-ears that actually cut about 26 dB. So if it's 100 dB in the room, it's only about 74 with my in-ears in. So I'll turn them all the way off and I'll listen to what's bleeding through. And then I'll turn up my pack just loud enough that the signal that's coming into my ears, is just starting to come above what was bleeding through, and I can just hear myself loud enough to hear what I need to hear. If you're about to take a solo or something, you can give yourself a little bump so that things are a little more clear, but you really want to have the discipline to keep that not any louder than it needs to be. How am I going to mix these? Okay, how do I get a good in-ear mix? It's a lot like a disciplined person using wedges. Only add what you need to add to get it over the bleed. If I'm standing right next to the drum kit, I probably don't need to add in the cymbal mics, right? They're probably going to be bleeding through my in-ears a little bit. I probably don't need the cymbal mics blasting into my ears. Yeah, it's just so keep in mind that you want to get your mix with the mains on, because you are going to be able to hear and feel some things from the mains, even with your in-ears in. So just add in only what you need. And then if generally your pack is going to have a thing called a limiter on it, definitely leave that on. That's to protect you if you've got the singer's mic in your in-ears and he drops the microphone and hits the floor. Bam! The limiter is going to protect your ears from getting a huge transient that's going to come through there. So definitely keep your limiter on. And then be careful with the high boost. A lot of them have a high boost button on there. The higher frequencies are the ones that are more damaging to your ears. Conversely, they are the ones that help you play your violin more in tune. So you want to be careful with that high boost. And I put it on and like, oh man, there's so much more sparkle in here. There is, just be aware that those are the frequencies that can damage your hearing. Also be aware that quality matters. We've talked about this before. Better gear, better hear. High quality audio does not need to be as loud to be distinct. I went from like a set of $300 custom molds to like a $1,000 set of custom molds. And I was like, holy cow, I can turn these things down and I can still hear myself as clearly as I could before, because the audio quality wasn't as good before. I had to compensate with volume. So better buds allow you to have lower volume, and that's going to protect your hearing more. So there are kind of three levels of the buds, as we talked about before. You got like the little cell phone buds. There are some universal fit, and they can get pretty good, up to a couple of $100. And then past that, you can get into custom fit buds. You'll have to go to an audiologist, and they're going to take a mold of each of your ears. And then that's going to be a piece of plastic that you just basically twist into your ear, and it's going to fit perfectly for your ear. Now you'll see a lot of times they'll say, hey, this got 7 drivers in it, or 3 drivers, or 2 drivers in it. Which one's better? More is not necessarily better. You can get a really high quality set of triple drivers that would sound better than some cheap 7 driver buds. So quality is quality. Quantity is not the same as quality, although they often go together. You got to also decide what you need to hear. If you're a violinist and you're playing mostly in a sort of a string quartet, you probably don't need like 4 subwoofers in your ear. Nobody's generating those super sub frequencies that you need to hear. If you're a bass player, yeah, you probably are going to want a number of subwoofers in your ear. So as a violinist, I only use triple drivers, and I can get plenty of bottom end in there to hear what I need to hear from the bass player and the kick drum and all that. And then I get that chest rattling sound because I'm usually kind of standing near the subs. So that's where I go. I use triple drivers. I have friends that are using 6 and 7 drivers, but most of them are either bass players or drummers, and they really need a lot of definition in that low end sound. Now, there are some cons. I don't want to act like in-ears are the solution to every problem. There are some things that I don't like about in-ears. It does take time to adjust. The first time you wear in-ears is going to be really disorienting. You're not going to like them at all. Probably the first couple times you're going to be like, I feel like I spent a lot of money and I hate this, because they're very isolating. They make you feel like you're not part of the ensemble. One of the ways that we can get past that is that they'll put room mics in the room and you can dial up the room. It's kind of a weird thing when you're playing and you look and the crowd's going, but you can't hear them. It's like I'm not getting any feedback from you guys, and I feel really lonely. It's a thing, and it does take a little bit of time to get used to. The other thing is, once you've got your in-ears in, you are utterly dependent on them working. If the battery dies or there's a frequency dropout or something, you are completely deaf. You're done. You're flying blind. So, and if your mix is not a good mix, all of a sudden, the keyboard player decks his piano and all you can hear in your ears is piano, you got to take them out and now you got nothing. So you're utterly dependent on them working, and you're utterly dependent on the mix that you get. So those are kind of some drawbacks to having in-ears. Overall, I love them. I have them. I've been using them for about 20 years. A lot of the jobs that you work are going to require them. A lot of the church gigs, a lot of the festival or touring gigs, it's going to be like, well, it's an in-ear gig. You're not going to be allowed to have a wedge on stage. You're not going to be allowed to have an amp on stage. Has to be in-ears. If you're going to be a working musician, you're probably going to have to get used to working with ears. You're probably going to need to buy some quality buds, and that's a reality in the business today. So I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, be sure to let us know in the comments section. Love for you to subscribe to our channel and check out a couple other videos we got. Thank you guys for hanging, and we'll catch you next time.